Thank you very much, everybody. I think after hearing everybody today and all the panelists, we will all agree, without a doubt, that we sit in a region that is definitely at the forefront of some of the most progressive and iconic real estate and hospitality developments of the world. Here are some examples, some recently delivered, or that many of us may potentially be working on. Some facts that may have not been mentioned yet today. Dubai alone is expecting to deliver a pipeline of 11,000 rooms by 2027. The Middle East has a construction of hospitality and residential development of 1.9 trillion USD, out of which UAE, KSA, and Egypt form 90% of that. In the Middle East, that's 650 hotel projects, and in the GCC, that's 61% of those which sit in the luxury sector. These numbers once again reiterate that unparalleled growth driven by global expertise, investments, and visionary projects. Now, so far, when we look at such projects, we believe they're predominantly designed and engineered based on financial metrics, whilst there's a lot of sentiment that is out there and key insights that really remain untapped. So why are we still planning based on our past successes, benchmarks, surveys, and often gut instinct? As a company, as had been mentioned, and we're actually moving into 4 continents as we speak, we've worked over the last decade in around 300 projects, close to 300 projects, and we always try to ask ourselves, whether it is strategically, conceptually, or design-wise, what makes experiences work, where, and why? We've learned over the decades that it changes constantly. And we've asked ourselves, could we find and analyze actionable data to elevate our projects to the next level, specifically from an investment and ROI perspective? Now, looking at the pipeline in the UAE, over 41% of the projects, or 42% of the projects actually, are mixed-use and integrated projects, which once again reiterates, if the projects and the destinations are becoming more complex, shouldn't our planning tools also evolve? This is why, over the last 4 years, we've been trying to synthesize this data and look at different angles of how we can use it for F&B, for hospitality, and for mixed-use real estate developments. And now, this year, specifically, through much more integration of AI, we believe it has actually been supercharged. And I'd like to introduce Foresight Data and show you a little bit of a teaser of what we do with it, and hope that it invites yourselves also to try to find different forms of data to drive these future projects and drive the region that we sit in. How does it work, we get asked. And a lot of people know a lot of sentiment analysis, and there's much about it out there. You've got a destination, whether it's your own, your competitor, your benchmark, and you start collecting all of the available digital reviews that may sit there. And AI will take each one of these different sentiments, analyze a topic, give a sort of sentiment to the topic, and it goes on that way. We've added a couple of layers, and looking at the previous panel, is trying to understand what are the next personas. Based on how people write, you can actually understand who they are. And there are some examples, but we can adjust those type of personas we may be looking for constantly. And once we know the personas, we can understand their demographics, their spending patterns, places they visit, and then decide to look for other personas of the same style. And these digital profiles that we've collected in the relevant sample location, whether it's your own or your benchmark, would actually also visit multiple other places. And that's when it becomes interesting. My audience, what do they have exposure to? Restaurants, mixed-use developments, hotels, shopping malls, retail brands, etc. And more importantly, what do they think when they go to these developments? In recent Dubai-specific research sets, we've noticed that each digital profile will, in average, visit another 15 destinations within the city itself. This is something that we thought was very interesting, and we can actually start multiplying moving forward. So understanding much more than just who is our audience, we want to understand where they are, where they go, how they think, what they value, and try to find that information in order to design. Which then brings these personas to life. And we always believe in showing you a bit of an example. And of course, we take something that's close to home as an example. And we asked ourselves, let's take 50 waterfront destinations across Dubai. Combination of restaurants, hotels, mixed-use developments, etc. Let's collect all the relevant digital profiles. These would be profiles that have a certain amount of data and information. And let's understand who those profiles are. Now, let's assume, for this case, that we'd be interested more in the high spenders. So let's take those 60,000, and we have actually noticed that within Dubai, they have visited 3,500 other businesses and locations. That's quite interesting, because if we actually identify the price point of all of those locations, which is, of course, all automated, we will be able to split between who the tourists are versus who the residents are, and we can actually position them on different spending quartiles. You will see that in the upper quartile, or mid-upper quartile, the residents of Dubai are actually prevailing. So we can actually say that in this city, the high spending power comes from the residents over the tourists in these quantities. However, we wanted to actually double-click and say, let us just take that upper quartile and study who those are, and use those as a little bit of a more fine-tuned and filtered base for our analysis. So that brought the 60,000 to 22,000. And those 22,000 personas have actually left 115,000 sentiments and data points across our city. That's very interesting, because usually to get this kind of information, you'd have to do extensive surveys, and you might actually not be hitting the right kind of information in people. Quick review, who are these 22,000 people? Predominantly male. We actually were quite interested in the fact that they're still pretty young. In this market, those with spending power are still sitting predominantly in the 30 to 39 bracket. And for those who are not UAE residents, where do they come from? From this set, it is Russia, followed by UK, India, France, and KSA. Now that we know who they are, let's explore a little bit more their exposure and their sentiment. What do we mean with exposure? We can follow these digital profiles all over the world. We spotted here, for example, the majority of the reviews with high sentiment for this specific set comes from the USA. How could I use this? Maybe look at which cities they go to, what they're exposed to there, and what drives the sentiment. You may ask me, I'm developing a real estate development, mixed use, which one of those are they exposed to? And here we show, for example, that 24% of that audience has been to Marina Bay Sands. Now, typically, exposure for us is not enough. I want to know, where have they been, and have they actually enjoyed it? And what specific components have they enjoyed? So here we took another example. Random pick. We don't want to take sides, and we know that everyone around the audience may be here. So we've taken a couple of real estate developments for this target audience, so the creme de la creme high spenders of the 22,000. And we've actually put here 4 quartiles. In the horizontal axis, you have frequency of visits, and in the vertical, you would have sentiment. Higher sentiment up, more frequency of mention to the right. And you can see that DIFC, St. Regis Gardens, and J1 Beach, for those specific audiences, sits in the high sentiment, high frequency of visit. That would be probably the strengths of the market. You could double click and say, let me understand why specifically these are of interest. What is it? And now in the next page, we'll show you how that exercise typically comes to life. Here, we've actually split all of those reviews and categorized them into hard element and soft elements. Hard elements, things that require significant capex, need to be planned well in advance, are probably going to be built and are harder to change down the line. Soft elements, sometimes within control of change, of course, maybe more operational, call it that. And in the hard elements, we've actually split between the visitors and the residents. How likely are these elements going to impact the overall sentiment? Hard elements are more important to visitors, a little bit less importance to residents. As you can see, 54% of the times they will be mentioned. But what are the specific topics? That's interesting. If you're looking for visitors, depending on your location or your strategy, views is the #1 most talked about, followed by landscape, and increasingly, which was not the case last year when we ran these datas, children and family facilities. Residents, convenience and amenities, accessibility and wayfinding, and parking. So now we start actually breaking down what makes these destinations successful, what drives up sentiment, and we're splitting it between hard and soft and between personas. You may want to go further and not just say, I want to know the visitors and the residents, but I'd like to know, for example, the Russians that are tourists, and that information, of course, can also be studied. And once determining what kind of, call it FMB, you may want to bring into your development, here we're actually studying what is the likelihood of one of these being identified and how much that will impact positively your real estate development. So you can see here, if you're looking at a luxury waterfront development, obviously you will have the premium full-service dining experiences in the lounge bar driving most of the positive comments and change, whilst if you're in a family lifestyle development, impulse is what prevails for this audience. And this is one of our favorites. It's a lot of information, but just to show you what could be available out there and then analyzed and synthesized. But here we have, for that audience, frequency of mentions across all of those reviews versus overall sentiment. And to make it a little bit easier and more digestible, in yellow you've got your design elements, hard elements, and in white your soft elements. For the luxury visitors, when they're going to these hospitality developments, from that audience we've looked at, atmosphere, concepts, cleanliness, valet services, diversity of experiences, dining options are the strengths of what make these places great. And then it's, of course, everything in the southern, below 0.4, would be the main threats of the market. Traffic and accessibility, restroom facilities, not having VIP parking, the general parking conditions, shading and cooling, and so on and so on. And we've been asked many times, this is predominantly historical, or this is predominantly what people are commenting today. We're looking at visions and future projects. How can we benchmark? What we've actually also done is time-stamped specific reviews over 3 years and see where's the growth. What are the components that are specifically increasing and becoming more important? In this case, within F&B and within restaurants, what are those points? Views have always been the most important, are highest or most likely to give you that high review in this audience, in this segment, in these type of developments, but it hasn't significantly growth. The whole movement on entertainment is obviously one that we can see here with the 95% growth, interior design, greenery, biophilic, landscaping, and so on. And lastly, if you have defined who your personas are, if you have defined who that audience is that you're looking for, and here we have 3 examples, family travelers, or luxury escapists, or culture seekers, or maybe a blend, and there could be unlimited options, you could identify per topic which ones matter most to them, so that you can actually bring a little bit of math and science to the art of strategizing and designing. Just want to thank you, and I just hope that this inspires a little bit. Feel free to QR here, and looking forward to talking to you if you'd like to understand how data can formally inform strategy and master planning. Thank you very much.